What's going on, everybody? In this video, I'm going to be designing a multi-step CRM and project management system for a shuttle booking services company. This was requested to me by one of the community members in makemoneywithmake.com, and it's probably like the most complicated type of CRM or project management system you'll ever build. I'm going to do it in monday.com, and I thought that by tackling this, I would essentially give anybody that watches this video the tools that they need in order to design any sort of CRM or project management system for their own business, because odds are it's going to be less complicated than this. So I'm not going to lie, this is a little bit on the drier end of the videos that I've recorded. It's a little bit more theory. I'm doing some flow charting. I'm sort of walking you through how to set up the logistics of connect and relationship boards, but I'd still consider this extraordinarily valuable if you are either running a business that has a little bit more complexity on the CRM or the project management side, or you're building systems for other people and you've just always wanted to know how to juggle more complicated systems with like orders and customers and agents and bookings and that sort of deal. So if that sounds something you guys want to improve on, this is the video for you. Stay tuned and let's get into it. The real juice is probably about halfway through this video, where I'm going to go through monday.com and show you guys actually how to set up one of these systems yourself from scratch. I also think the real value here is I'm going to run you through my thought process at every step. I haven't solved this problem yet, so I'm going to be solving this problem in real time. And I'm also just going to be guiding you guys through what I think and why I think it. The question that I received that prompted this whole video was from the lovely Rush Futurize. He said, regarding the question I mentioned during the weekly office hours, I do a weekly office hour as part of my community offering where I answer questions, I show people how to set up their automation business, all that stuff. So during one of these weekly office hours, Rush asked, hey, I'm dealing with a vehicle shuttle service business. Often travel agencies or companies book shuttle services for their guests or executives, which leads to two main challenges. Number one, sometimes there are different passengers and bookers. Frequently, the person booking the service is not actually the one using it. And number two, there are multiple orders with varying addresses. Since we work with agencies, they often need to book services multiple times with different addresses each time. This becomes a challenge in designing the CRM system. In my situation, there are also some cases where a single booking involves picking up passengers from different locations and transporting them to a common destination. However, I think this might be too complex or uncommon for most people, so we can skip discussing this aspect. The reason why I wanted to do this is because I think this illustrates very well the complexities in designing CRMs for like sort of uncommon business models. Like, it's easy enough to design a CRM or a project management system for a very simple business. Like, I don't know, content writing is a good example, where typically you only really have like maybe a list of clients and then like a list of the articles. But for something that's more complex, something that has more moving parts and something that has a few exceptions you need to keep track of, this booking shuttle service CRM or tracker, whatever we want to call it, this is about as complicated as one of these systems can get. So if you learn how to do a system like this, then you'll easily be able to do any other system later on down the line. And whether you're building out a CRM or a project manager for yourself, or whether you're doing it for a company, maybe as sort of like an operations person or a process person, these skills are extremely invaluable. If I did not know how to build CRMs or project management systems, I would not have been able to scale my content writing company to 7 figures. Ain't no way in hell, because just having a good system allowed us not to hire like probably 5 extra people, 5 project managers. Those would have crushed our margins and reduced our ability to grow. And nowadays, honestly, like, I don't even know if people really even need project managers for digital agencies, at least smaller digital agencies, because they can just get away with having like a really good CRM, really good project manager. And that'll just do most of it for you. Sorry, really loud car. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is this is a little more complex, so I can't just like dive right into what I'm going to be using to build this out, which is monday.com. A little more complex, so what I need to do is I need to flowchart this first, or I need to like basically build like a data structure almost. I'm going to talk you guys through my approach for this. I haven't done this yet. This is like my first stab at it, so you'll see my thought process in real time, sort of the decisions that I'm making. I'm not going to say that the decisions I'm going to make are the perfect ones. There may be better ways to accomplish the same thing, but my way is certainly going to accomplish the end result. And hopefully this is going to help you guys when you're faced with a similar problem. Just walk through whatever process that I'm using for this, for your own business or for your own request. So first off, we have 2 very important pieces of info. I'm just going to open up Whimsical over here. This is my flowchart. 2 very important pieces of information. Number 1, different passengers and bookers. Frequently, the person booking the service is not the one using it. And number 2, multiple orders with varying addresses. Since you work with agencies, they often need to book services multiple times with a different address each time. This becomes a challenge in designing the CRM system. So we don't know anything aside from this. This is a very general scope, and a lot of the time, if you're working as like an automation business or you're working as an operations business, this is basically the only scope you're going to get. And that's okay. You just need to make sure the system conforms to a couple of very simple, like foundational principles, and you can build in like the rest of all the functionality later. But as long as you set it up right from the beginning, that's all that matters. So normally, and I'm going to be doing this in Monday.com, so I haven't fully set up Monday yet, but I'll just do it with you guys once I'm done this. Normally, you want to minimize complexity as much as humanly possible. And so that's sort of my guiding principle here. I know for sure, no matter what, we're going to need to have a few different, you almost think of them as databases, a few different like lists or tables. We're going to need to have a list for passengers, so people that are physically taking a ride. And we're also going to need to have a list for bookers, or I'm probably going to call them agents in this case, because the person booking the service is not always the one using it. And because if you think about it, there's probably some functional utility, like there's probably some benefit to having bookers and passengers, right? Also, I'm trying to think about the relationships between these. One booker could probably have multiple passengers that they're booking, and then one passenger is probably going to go one booker or zero bookers. And then what else we need here is we need some way to represent an order. And the way that I'm thinking about this off the top of my head is I can imagine how we would have an order, and in an order, we would relate each order to a passenger and a booker. So the entire success of the system is going to hinge on our ability to make use of what are called like relational queries between tables. Monday.com specifically calls them boards. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be connecting different boards together, like kind of linking them together based off of passengers, agents, and then orders. So every order is going to have a passenger and then an optional agent, right? Sometimes passengers are going to book the service themselves. Other times agents are going to book the service for passengers. But at the end of the day, the number one thing that is important for the system is to have a list of orders. And then what we can do is we could sort the list of orders by date so that anybody on the team will know, the next order is June 20th at 9:30 at this location, right? So trying to think about it from like as simple a perspective as possible. Okay, so that was a bunch of word vomit, but what would this actually look like in practice? Well, we're going to have, let's use this because this is sort of like a database. So we're going to have orders. So we're going to have a board full of orders. Then we're also going to have a board for passengers. And then we're also going to have a board for agents. And the way that this works is, I'm going to use some arrows here. In order for there to be an order, there needs to be a passenger. So basically, every order will have at least at minimum one passenger. And then, agents is sort of not 100% required. Oops, sorry, it looks like I deleted one of the arrows there. So passengers to orders, and then agents to orders. This isn't 100% required, so I'm just going to use a dash to illustrate this. This is sort of optional. And then we also need there to be an association between passengers and agents. So let me just draw a little arrow over here, and then I'm also going to draw an arrow going back. And so this is not 100% required. We don't need to have an association between passengers and agents. There's going to be some instances in which an order comes in that has a passenger but that doesn't have an agent. And then there's also going to be a bunch of instances where like an agent might have multiple passengers. So I don't think there's really a good way for me to illustrate like the one-to-many relationship here, but I'm just going to use this sort of diagrammatically. Okay, now we have this is a very simple sort of diagram, and the reason I did it is just because I want us to be able to keep this in our mind. I don't want us to have to like constantly be trying to remember kind of the structure here. This just stops us from having to bounce this around in our working memory. What we need to do is we need to define some fields for the orders for the passengers and for the agents now. The way that I personally like to do this in Whimsical is I just add like a little sticky note, and then I will just list out the fields that I think that we need. So for orders, for sure, we're going to have to do passenger. And basically order is going to be we're going to connect an order to a passenger. And so every order is going to have a passenger of some kind. We're obviously going to need to have a location, because really like the order is the location, right? Like pick me up at here and pick me up there. Actually, we're going to need a pickup location. We're actually going to need a destination location. And then we're going to probably want to have a type of some kind. The type is just going to be a simple field that determines whether or not this is like a passenger booked or agency booked. And then if it's agency booked, we're also going to need to have like an agency field. Now, because we know very little about the rest of the system, I'm going to leave the number of fields there. But you can also imagine how you could do anything with this. Assuming that we're getting orders from an online system, we could build out like a revenue tracker. So every order could have a revenue associated with it, for instance. Every order could also have a driver associated with it, for instance. Actually, now that I think about it, a driver is probably a good idea to have. I'm just going to call this the assignee field. Well, no, let's call this a driver field. And basically, the driver is going to be an assignee field that tells us who is responsible for managing that order. That's pretty straightforward. We also need a time, now that I'm thinking about this as well. So we need a pickup time. So let me just rearrange this so that it's maybe a little bit simpler. And so that we have all the information that we need. And instead of agency, let me just go agent. Because realistically, agent is a more general term that I think will cover us. So anyway, as I mentioned, you could store like revenue, you could store, I don't know, you can even store like margins, you could have like earnings, you could have profit per order if you're paying the driver like a fixed rate based off distance. You could do things like you pump in the pickup location and the destination location into Google Maps every time a new order is created. You figure out the distance between the two, and then you like pay the driver some prorated like distance amount between like the pickup and the destination location times 2 or whatever. Maybe you have some internal rate or system to figure this out. This is basically what platforms like Uber and whatnot do under the hood. They just have all of their own data. They don't need to call the Google Maps API because they have their own. So yeah, this is what an order is going to be, and then you can put in all the information in the whole wide world aside from that. But this information is specific to the order, right? Now, we also want some information for the passenger. Actually, let me put that up here. Maybe it'll be a little bit easier to see and distinguish which is which here. Then we're also going to want some information for the agent. So the passenger obviously is now data that is specific to this person. So we're going to want like a first name. We're going to want a last name. Let's think. We're going to want an email address. We're going to want a phone number. Maybe we have a list of preferences. So maybe every passenger, when they fill out their form, just says, hey, do you have any preferences of your ride? Do you want it, I don't know, quiet? Do you want like the person to talk? Do you want, I'm not sure, but essentially you can just put in some ideas. You can put in some preferences about how you would like your ride to be, right? I think Uber probably does that nowadays, or maybe Lyft does it, or one of those platforms. You could obviously do like source. You could ask, where they found you from, and you could do all that, but I'm not going to focus on that. For agents, presumably like company name is important. And this is going to be sort of like the primary field upon which we decide whether or not it's a new agent or not. We could do first name as well, last name as well, email, address, phone number. And then this is probably all the information I'm going to put in for the agents for now. Maybe there'll be some more fields that come up. But regardless of whatever CRM or project manager you're using, there are also some additional fields that they basically put on every type, every field. Good Lord, it's early. Every row, which is usually like the date updated or like the date created or a creation log of who the person is or that sort of thing. You can also imagine how if we have like a sales team or something, we can assign salespeople to agents. Maybe those salespeople are responsible for trying to sell the agent something. We can have like an assignee field. A lot of options here, but this is good enough for our simple system. And essentially, these are the foundational principles that we're going to use to build out the rest of this flow. And then once we have these foundational principles, you can just add whatever you want. So we're going to have orders, passengers, and agents. It's going to be sort of like a 3-step system. And now that we have like a loose understanding of what's going to go on, I'm just going to jump into Monday and start building this out. So why don't we just call this first board orders? Essentially, Monday is just guiding me through some onboarding, so I'm just going to skip all this. We'll just go X, Y, and Z. And let's not do any automations. And I'm also going to run through the board connection for Monday. I'm going to guide you guys through basically everything. I haven't verified my email yet, so I might have to do that in order to do automation. So let me just jump over here and do it. Cool, looks good to me. All right, so we have our orders board. I'm going to want to create 2 more boards. So I'm going to want to call one agents. I'm also going to want to call this one, if I duplicate this again, passengers. Now we have a bunch of random bullshit on this board we need to fix. Monday will separate data into groups. Not all CRMs or project management systems are the same, but this is what Monday does. So I'm just going to delete all of this. So no completed groups for us. And I'm going to close this onboarding stuff so that doesn't pop up every time. And I'm just going to call like the main one like main. I don't really see any reason to separate these into groups. So for me, that's not really necessary or required. Okay, the way that I'm going to do orders is, if you think about it, like we need one of these fields to be the primary key, so to speak. We need one field that is always going to be different than all of the other fields. So if you think about it, we can't do address, because if we receive multiple orders for the same address, then they'd sort of collide. There'd be like multiple orders with the exact same name, and it would be difficult to filter and difficult to search. So what I do in situations like this is I will concatenate 2 or more fields together. So I will usually do, like in this case, it would be like a location, and then it'd be like a date and a time. And presumably there aren't going to be 2 people that are being picked up at the same date and time that are going to a particular location. If you're afraid of collisions, and if your order system's even bigger than that, you could also do like location, date, time, name of the passenger or something like that, or phone number of the passenger. You could also like assign just some random ID to every single one of these and then worry about having the data elsewhere. That's totally doable. But yeah, that's what I'm going to do here just to make it really simple. The way that you do this is you need to go to, change item terminology. And then I'm going to say order instead. So this is an order. This one here is going to be agents, which is okay. So we don't need to necessarily do anything fancy there. Then this one here is going to be passengers. So it's going to be passenger. Okay, lovely. We don't need X, Y, and Z, so let's just delete these. I'm going to create an example order, and I'm just going to add in like some location. We'll say like 29th Penn Drive Avenue. What are our postal codes like in the United States? Something like that, probably. I don't actually know. Let's do Portland, Oregon, this. That looks nice. And why don't we do the current time? So we'll do 8:30 a.m. June 20th. This will be reasonable to put in. We don't actually need to see all that. We just want something that's reasonably unique. So I'm just going to cap it out here. We see the address. Okay, so we need a couple of other fields. The first other field we're going to need is, if we go back to our Shuttle service CRM, we're going to want a passenger. So I'm going to need to do a link or connect field. So the way you do connect boards in Monday, basically the way that you store a record in a column of another board is you use this connect board. Then you select it. So we're going to be selecting passengers, and then I'm going to connect that here, and I will do this later. But we're going to say passengers on this booking. So let me just try and make this as small as humanly possible. Then we're going to need a pickup location. So we can do an address field, maybe a location field. Yeah, there we go. So we'll say pick up location. I'm going to then duplicate this column to the right, and we're going to call this drop off location. And maybe we don't even need the term location. It'll probably be self-evident, and that way I can make the fields a little bit smaller. When I type in like the Giza Pyramid Complex or whatever, it's pretty obvious that this is a location. And that would be a very long drive. Okay, great. We need the pickup time. So we should have maybe like a due date or something. Probably the date field, yeah. We should have a time here as well. Oh, add time. There we go. Okay. So maybe we're doing this on June 20th at 9 a.m. We need a driver, which we can just do in our system as like an assignee or a people field. So I'm going to be the driver. We need a type, so passenger booked or agent booked. So I'm going to do, I think in Monday it's called a status field, so we're going to roll with that. We're going to say passenger booked, agent booked. And for now, I'm just going to leave the rest of these as, you got to have a default label of some kind in Monday, unfortunately. How do I change this color? I don't want this to be green or whatever. Okay, we'll do green or blue. These aren't super, like these don't imply that green is better than blue or anything like that. So it shouldn't be a problem. And I'm just going to have a third default field called intake here, which is sort of like the default, which is annoying, but that should be all right. And it looks like actually passenger booked is like a complete status, and I don't really want a done status here. I'm not sure why that's a done status. Why don't we do this? Why don't we just default to passenger booked? And then, oh, I can't delete. I got to deactivate it first. That's annoying. Okay, whatever. The default's going to be passenger booked, and then we'll also have an agent booked. So this one is passenger booked. And then the last one is going to be agent. And so the way that we do this is we go to connect boards, and I'm going to set this up with my agents over here. Okay, now keep in mind, this is using the pluralized version of it, passengers, agents, right? Realistically, we're only gonna need one, and I just have like minor OCD about stuff like this, so if I could change it from agents to agent, probably be better. And then if I change this from, or passengers to passenger, it's probably better. Oh, geez, I could have totally just changed the title of this. That's annoying. All right, whatever. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add the rest of the data for the agent and for the passenger as well. So for the agents, we need the company name, first name, last name. So the agent is realistically probably just going to be a company name. All right, so if you think about it, we already have the company name here. This is just going to be the title of the board, more or less. We don't actually need a company name field. What we do want is we want a text field, which I'm going to call first name. We want another text field that I'm going to call last name. We want an email address, so we should have an email field on Monday. Yep. We want a phone number, presumably. And then what we also want is we want a list of orders. And that's one thing I didn't add here. So connect boards, I'm going to connect this to the orders. And basically we want a list of orders that are connected with this, kind of back and forth. So if one agent is responsible for 15 orders, we want a way to track that. And hypothetically, I'm going to associate this with our 29 pen drive avenue record. And I pretend that I'm an agent here. Awesome. It's even got my, my location, which is cool. All right, and last but not least, we're going to do the passenger field. We'll do first name, last name, email address, phone number, and preferences. So realistically, the likelihood of there being two people with the exact first name and last names is pretty low. So I'm just going to leave the first name. If I do something like Nick's or I, for instance, yeah, sure. My name is probably less likely to have a collision with somebody else's name because, it's like vaguely European sounding, specifically Eastern European, and there are very few people with the same permutation of first and last name. But I think we could probably, I think we should probably store this data again. It's like a first name and a last name field. Yeah, so I'm going to leave the first and the last name, and then I'm going to add a first name field here. And then I'm also going to add a last name field. So we're going to go first name, last name. I'm going to go email address here. I'll do phone number as well. And what else did I want? I wanted a preferences field, right? So preference is just going to be like, hey, does this person have any specific requests that they want to make? And then I also want to have a connect field, and I want to connect this back to my orders. For the same reason as what I mentioned earlier. And then I'm gonna write all the information. So Nick, Sarayev. We're gonna use a different email here. I'm gonna have like a different phone number. and then I'll say, I don't want to talk to you. I don't know, some people don't like talking. I'm not like that. I yap constantly, nonstop, every time I get a ride anywhere. And yeah, we're going to want to associate this, and we're going to want to associate this. I have a feeling these should automatically be associating, so I'm surprised that they're not. Let me try removing this order. Let me give this thing a little refresh here. This should be a two-way connection. Why is this not a two-way connection? If I go back to connect here. Oh, yeah, sorry. You need to create a two-way connection, not a one-way connection. So I actually need to delete these fields here, and then we need to remake them all. Sort of annoying, but c'est la vie. Make sure you're doing a two-way connection. This way we'll essentially be able to track on both sides, not just one side. So from passengers, I'm going to go connect board. I'm going to select my orders board as a two-way connection. So now we have like a back and forth connection, and I can say this order. For my agents, I'm going to go connect boards, and then I'm going to go create a two-way connection to orders as well. And then if I go to my orders now, I'll have two. I'll have link to passenger, and I'll also have link to agents. So I'm going to drag this over to the beginning, and then I always like to order things in terms of priority. So for me, a passenger is high priority, and then agent is lower priority, so I'm going to leave that back here. Then we need to associate the order here. Okay. All right, so now we have a three-step system basically with an order, an agent, and then a passenger, and they're all associated between the two. When a new order comes in, you can imagine maybe it'll come in through a form or something like that online. We're going to get the name of the person, assuming that the form, I don't know, tracks the user of it. Maybe you have like some login functionality in your portal. You'll also have the passenger, and they'll also have the agent information. And the benefit of this simple system now, and I'm just going to do everything manually here, but the benefit of this simple system, and we should probably come up with like an actual address. There you go. Why don't we do that? I'm in Australia apparently. The benefit of this is essentially now we have, we need some other one. Let's go Sydney Opera House. There you go. I have no idea if those are even remotely close to each other. But the benefit of this now is, we could have multiple orders come in for different passengers and have the same agent, hypothetically, if that's necessary or required. And then we could also track which agents have, or how many orders every agent has, and then how many orders every passenger has. And the cool part about this is now at any point in time, we can use make.com or similar no-code tool to query an order. And then after they query an order, we can grab the passenger data, and then we can also grab the agent data. Or we can query a passenger if we're doing some sales activity, and then we can query every single one of the orders that they have, and then count up, say, the distance of every order, for instance, or who the agent on every order was, if we want to assign some referral multiplier or whatnot. Essentially, this is the most flexible way to design a system by separating it into these three fundamentally different data types, and then by associating them through relational or connect boards, instead of doing what a lot of people would do in this case, which is probably just try and cram everything into just one board, and just juggle everything that way, which is sort of annoying. So let's pretend that I'm adding a bunch more orders here. I don't know, I want some other location in Australia, so let me just use this location field. I'm going to say 19 Australia. Looks like there's a street in Australia called Australia Street. Nice. We'll go camper down somewhere else. 24 camper down in Coffs Harbour with this date here. We want a time as well, right? Maybe we want like 11 or something. Also assigned to the same driver. This time it's just passenger booked. And then I'm going to grab, oh man, I love how there's like a map function here, so anybody on the team could easily see where this order is coming from. Then I said June 21st, 11 a.m. So we got a couple orders here, and let's say they're for the same passenger. The first one is agent booked, the second one was passenger booked. If we go back to passengers now, you'll see that there are now 2 orders represented in the orders field. And so if we were to query a passenger, we now have 2 separate orders. You can change the way that this looks. So instead of it kind of looking like this, I believe you can just show a number, for instance. There are many ways that you can kind of manipulate this. Anywho, now that we have our 3 simple fields open, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to connect them in Make, and I'll just show you how much more valuable it is to build something out like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get an item. In order for this to work, I need to connect it. In order for that to work, I need to grab an API key. And so I believe in Monday, in order to do that, you need to go to developers. And then you need to go to my access tokens. And then I need to show this and then copy it and then go to API key, paste it in. So we now have a connection to Monday. The ID of the record that I want, at least to start, is I'm just going to use this record. So I'm going to open this up, and then in the top right-hand corner, there's like a pulse ID in Monday, it's called. And that pulse ID is the ID of the specific field. So I'm going to call that, and I'm not going to check the board ID. That's okay, we're just going to run it. And what you'll see is after I run it, I get all of that information. But there's another field called mappable column values, and one of them is called connect boards. And you see that it has a bunch of linked pulse IDs, and in our case, just because we're putting all of the data in like the title, we just get like all the text, but we also have an array of other IDs of other boards, basically. So linked pulse ID 1 is this, linked pulse ID 2. So we could have a flow, for instance, that get passenger. So we could say get passenger, and then for every passenger, we could get orders, for instance. And if we feed in the connect boards, linked pulse ID here, then if I run this flow, this thing will run a couple of times. And you see, why did it only grab 1? Hold on a sec, we should have an array of linked pulse IDs, right? So this actually should be iterating over an array. Hold on. Okay, so we have to iterate over here. So let me feed in this iterator, and then I'm going to feed in the linked pulse ID array here. Then I'm going to take the output of this iterator. So I'm going to reconnect this. And then cancel this, and then click it over and again. And then I want the linked pulse ID. There we go. So now we can get 1 passenger, and then we can get all of the orders for a particular passenger. So now we have all of their data. And so hypothetically what we could do is, I don't know, let's say that maybe one of these order fields in orders was like revenue or something. Let me see if there's a money field. Yeah, I'll just type in revenue. This is 150, this is 200. If I go back to our make.com integration, we can then use like a numeric aggregator. Well, actually, let me just run this first to show you. So now we get the, right down over here, numbers field, numbers underscore underscore 1, which is 200. And we could feed in to a numeric aggregator, hypothetically, if we wanted to sum up the revenue of this at some point. And then we could go numbers 1. The source module for this is going to be get orders, and then the aggregate function is going to be sum. And we're going to ignore the transformation. And at the end here, we have, when you run an aggregator function, you have to connect the source to the iterator that's essentially produced the iteration. Otherwise, the output is going to be kind of odd. Anyway, we have a result of 350 here, which is basically like the revenue that has been summed. So I show you this not because I think this is like hyper relevant to me building out the logic, but because I wanted to show you just how flexible your system gets and how much you could do on the automation side of things when you connect systems this way. Instead of you having to, instead of you having to muddle up a single board with all of the information, like imagine if we tried to add a separate passenger here and then just had like a passenger first name, passenger last name, passenger email address, passenger this, passenger that. Imagine how many fields there would be on this main board, and then also just how much of a clusterfuck it would be to manage this data and to ensure that it's the exact same between passenger. What if one time one of their names gets put in slightly differently or whatnot, right? When you connect a passenger field to a whole other board called passengers that stores that separate data, you basically ensure that the data is going to be the same between every call, which is why it's just a lot simpler and what I'd much prefer. So yeah, a lot you could do with that. I think if I were to build out the system and kind of flesh it out a little bit more, what I would do is I would probably add a form at the front end. The form would take in the order, and in order to fill in an order, you would need to add a passenger, and so you need to select who the passenger is, for instance. And then you'd also need to have an optional field that allows you to enter in whether or not an agent is present. I would also have some other field or form, if you wanted to make your own like SaaS app or whatnot, where somebody can like create their own passenger profile. And then, now they have a passenger profile. Every time that they make an order, it's automatically filled in that they are the passenger on that order. And then I do the same thing for agents. And then I would also assign agents to passengers. And so maybe like an agent owns a bunch of passengers, for instance. That's one thing that I didn't necessarily do. Let me see if passengers have agents. No, they don't. I might assign certain agents to certain passengers where, one agent might have 3 or 4 of them. So maybe, this one has Nick. And then on all orders that the agent is doing for a passenger, they're just like the default agent. For that person. So now, every time we get a passenger record, we know that their agent is left click. The vast majority of their orders are probably going to include left click. We know that, they have a list of some past orders. We have some preferences. If a driver jumps into the system and, sees, if we sort this based off due date, which it sort of already is sorted based off due date just because of how I put this in. But if we sort this based off due date, for instance, maybe we make due date the most important field here. We call this pickup time. Maybe we call this, let's just use pickup date. I'm realizing here that I didn't use location or on the pickup or drop off fields, hence why that might be a little bit confusing. So, now they can jump in, take a really quick look at the passenger field. They see the preferences. They're like, okay, sure, that makes sense. Then they jump in, check the address on a map, which is like a one-click integration. They say, like how do I get to that road? Okay, I guess I need to pull in here. All right, that's easy. Then, they look at the drop-off location. They're like, this is Sydney Opera House. This is going to be like a massive pain in my ass, but hey, I'll do it anyway. And then, because we're using assignee fields and whatnot, they get automatically notified, which allows them to, just like kind of manage their orders and whatnot. I believe that is more or less what I wanted to do for this system. I wanted to show you how to build out an end-to-end, more complicated CRM. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. If you guys have any questions about how to set up a multi-step CRM like this, feel free to let me know. I love doing stuff like this. This is where I got my start in project management, CRMs, and operations. And it's where I will find my end. No, I don't really know. But yeah, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, just leave a comment down below and we'll sort of take it from there. Thanks so much. Do all that fun YouTube stuff, like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.